mais fácil.
Okay. Okay, sorry about the noise. It's my daughter. She just arrived from school. And yeah. Let's start then. My name is Bruno. I'm head of mobile at just a second. Sorry about that. Okay, my name is Bruno. I'm head of mobile at Timehop. Today we're going to talk a little bit about MVVM architecture or design partner, and talk a little bit also about mobile applications. And I will not be coding anything, but I will show a few things just to explain the idea. Yeah, that's it. So just to introduce a little bit. Most of the application, even mobile in the beginning, was more a MVC pattern, which was MVC, MVP, anyways, model view presenter, model view controller. And the way that it communicates was active communication. Was, for example, the controller sending a message to the view saying show a loading spinner. But and then this was the beginning, was very binded. And then when we start using a Rex, which is another technology, I will not go deep on this, but it's more reactive. And then people start using even more MVVM. What is MVVM? The concept is pretty straightforward, but the main difference from an MVP is that there is, I mean, I would say that there is no view controller, but there is no controller. The view you bind, this is the difference. The main difference is that data binding. The view you bind to the view model, and the view model in this binding is the way that they both gonna communicate. And the view model is basically where the logic keys, you're gonna fetch data from APIs. You're gonna have your model, which is the data structure, is information that you have and you can save it on the database, or you're gonna receive that from a backend. And the view model is gonna do what it needs to do with this data. And then using the data bind, the view model will update a publisher or some property that it has, and this property is being attached to the view. I mean, the view is subscribed to that publisher to be notified about any change in the data. So if the data change, the view will be updated. Is that what we call about being reactive? The things change and the view get updated automatically. And the view itself also binds some events. So in the same way, when a button is pressed, it will publish an event to the view model, and the view model, okay, I received that button, the save button was pressed. So I'm gonna receive some data together, and the data that I have the data actually, and I'm gonna save that data. And that's how it will basically works. Moving on a little bit more, the main advantage is that there is a very good separation of the concerns, the view and the model, and there is the view model in the middle. So the view doesn't know anything about the model, and the model doesn't know anything about the view. All the logic is in the view model, which is in the middle, and the view model also doesn't have a reference to the view. It's just, as I said, the view is subscribed to things in the view model, and the view will communicate with that, basically receiving when data updates, it goes to the view. When the view receives an event, it sends to the view model, and the view model will communicate with whoever he wants to communicate. With all that said, it's an easy to maintain environment. It's easy to understand the flow. The communication is really transparent. I mean, you know exactly what are the inputs that the view model is waiting. When I say inputs, is a button that's pressed, a gesture, anything, and also the data that's sent to the view also is really easy to see and understand what's going on. And for the last one is how testable this architecture is really easy to test because, as I said, all the concepts are very well separated. So making tests for your model layer or for your view model or for even for the, not for the view itself, but for the communication, the bindings, is really straightforward. I'll put some examples as we talk more about that. And yeah, I think that. So now let's talk a little bit about the model, just to explain exactly what the model is. The model is basically, the domain model is represents data. Is if you have, for example, if you're gonna receive information about a person from the backend, you're gonna have a model that represents exactly all the information that you're gonna receive. And that model also can represent the data that you have saved in a database. But that's not, the view is not aware about that, because even you have this model, what your view may show is just a representation of that. Things may change. I'll put some examples later just to explain it even more. But the view model is the one that knows the model and knows what to send to the view. So he does what it needs to be done to facilitate that communication, mediate that communication. That's the design part that you use to say that the view model is. Thinking about tests for a model, you basically can think mocking an API response, and then you need to convert that JSON, or I mean XML. I don't know the format that your backend is going to work, but you need to make sure that the conversion is working well and that the model is well represented and it has the right content, and when you save it, all this stuff. Moving on, we have the view model, and as I said, it's abstraction of the view, is where the business logic is, and it does not have, this is important, it does not have any reference from the view itself. It just has the publishers and the way that the view is going to connect to that. The views, as I just said, the view directly binds to the VM properties to send and receive updates. The view model is where we can test a lot of things, because the view model knows how to communicate with the APIs. If you have a backend or a database, a repository to save data, or I mean, whatever your application does. So you can test when I try to fetch data, and you're gonna mock the data that you're gonna receive. You're gonna mock that server. So you know what the server, the fake server, is gonna return to the view model. You know exactly what the view model needs to send, not send, but what it will, how it will update the data, and that's the data that your test will be looking for, because it's the same data that the view is looking for. So you know exactly how it, for example, if you receive, let's say if you receive first name, last name, two fields separated, but when you send that data to the view, you're gonna send just full name. So you're gonna validate that the logic is to concatenate these two strings is working properly. This is really easy. I mean, it's just a very simple example. Of course, there is more data handling that the view model will do to properly show the data as the view expects to see. Yeah, and basically that's part of that's what the view model does. Talking more about the view, what the view is basically the layout and the appearance on the app. Is what you see when you have the app open. That's the view. That's where is visible to the user. Is where the user is gonna are gonna interact with your application, and it basically forward our events and inputs to the view model, and it receive data and updates from the view model. So, for example, show something in screen, show a loading spinner, or move to the next screen. All these things is basically the view model who decides when to do it and how to do it. Some examples here, we're going to think more for view. I already saw some ways to unit test views, but I really don't like it. The way that I prefer to test views is using UI tests. So basically, it's your application running, you have a kind of robot that's going to interact with your view, tapping on specific fields, and you know what to expect from that. Talking about this on iOS and Android, they are not, they can fail a little times. It's not so reliable, I would say, but overall it works well. And maybe it's just some retries and you need to create some mechanism for that, but it's really good to test if the elements are correct, if the data is showing as we expect, if if the navigation is happening how it should be, if the buttons that should be enabled are enabled, or if the buttons that should not be enabled are not enabled. Moving on, I'm gonna give you an example, and there is one important thing that I forgot to mention. One good thing about the MVVM is that there is an idea of reusing the view. So you can have the same view being used by different view models. When I say that, let's say that's the example that I'm gonna show. So imagine that you have application, very simple application. I got this from Apple. It's an example that they have. Very simple. It shows a park, a Turtle Rock in California. It's a park in California. It shows an image. It shows a map with the location, and it shows a description about that. And that's it. So basically, you have a view model that's gonna go to an endpoint, get all this information, and update the fields, and the view is gonna be looking at fields, and when they get updated, the view is gonna refresh and show that data. Now imagine that you have the same layout, but instead of showing parks or locations, you're gonna show a person. So you have The Rock, he's the actor, everybody knows him. So it's the same UI as you can see, it's exactly the same. The only thing that changed is the information that we are showing. We are showing a photo, we are showing a name. It could be a completely different endpoint. So you have a totally different endpoint. So what I say with that is you're gonna have different information that you're gonna receive from the backend. The backend you send other fields, another completely JSON format for you. And basically the view model is gonna get that data, transform to the way that you are, the view is expecting, and send to the view. So just to explain, to do that, what we're gonna do, we're gonna have a content view model that's generic. That's the way that we do, like an interface, something. And then we're gonna create the specific ones. This one is just to explain. We have the API service here declared. You have the data. This is just a content. This is the information that the view is expecting. As you can see, the view is expecting latitude, longitude, the URL for the photo, the title, location name, states, description. It's not attached if the person, if the location. It's very generic. And this content view is just something that we're gonna create two, one for person, for people, and one for locations. And these content view models, you're gonna have something like people content view model, and this knows where the data is. What is the endpoint that needs to be fetched? You need to fetch information from. And the other is the location view model, also knows that and knows how to parse and how to properly create this data here, the content data, and send to the view. So as an example here, these are, let's say that the people, this is the model class. So imagine that the view model for people, when it goes to the backend, it will receive this information: first name, last name, gender, address, about, photo, age. You see, there is no latitude or longitude. So basically, we're gonna need to get the address and using geolocation, get the latitude and longitude, because that endpoint, that API, does not return that for you. But when you think about the location, you're gonna receive name, location, address, you receive the latitude and the longitude, so things are a little bit easier. But instead of a photo, you receive many photos, but okay, your view model can get one of the photos, and they're gonna convert, I just returned to the previous one, to this format here, and the views know exactly how to show this data. It doesn't care if it's a person, if it's a place, or if it's anything else. Imagine even more things like, for example, if you are looking for a person here, we can put a button, and when this button is tapped, the view model for person knows that, okay, I'm showing a person. When I tap this, I'm gonna open IMDb and show all the movies that this actor, his person has worked, or for the place. The place, there is a button that's routes to this place, and when you tap that, it will open Google Maps and show you the road from where you are to this place. So basically, the view is just a button for both, just a button. The view model is you decide what's this button is gonna, what's the text on these buttons, and what's the action when these buttons are tapped. So the view is completely dumb about that. The view doesn't know what's gonna happen. It should just say, okay, the user tapped this button, and do whatever you do, or should do something, and the view model is basically update itself, and the view know how to update itself too. Talking a little bit now about mobile. As I said in the beginning, when you think about how mobile used to be using MVP or MVC, we have the activities concept on Android, the view controller on iOS, and the MVVM to start, this idea of MVVM start with the racks. And there was no, I mean, it was not easy to implement something like that. You have to do some adjusts. And now, even Apple and Google, both are adding frameworks to the Android system, and Apple to the iOS, not iOS only, but macOS, iOS, tvOS, watchOS. They are adding both its own frameworks. For iOS, we have SwiftUI. The concept is really MVVM. You're gonna have a view. The view is really easy to bind the things. You don't need to have a class. The view itself already binds directly to the view model, and you can have fields that you already reference the view model property. That when that, for example, I have a spinner on the screen, a load spinner, and in the view model I have a boolean. When that boolean is false, my view knows that the spinner should be invisible. When the boolean is true, I know that the spinner should be visible. So it's really like there is no message being sent. It's just I update this, you are observing that field, and I know that I need to change mine here. And they also add combine, also makes even powerful these, how you facilitate things, how you have publishers, all this stuff that facilitates reactive communication. On Android, on the same side, they have now Compose UI. It's really nice. It's still in beta, so we are not using yet. But coroutine is also something really powerful. I would say many companies are moving from racks, moving out away from the racks and starting using coroutines. It's not something simple because it's not, the company is not well isolated or racks. It basically, it interacts with your screen, with your views, with your presenters, controllers, the repositories, everything using a rack. So changing to coroutines is not simple, but it's much lighter, it's much powerful, faster, and so there is no reason to do not move away from racks, and that's the movement that we are seeing on all applications to go away. And same thing on iOS, moving away from racks to use combine. And just to explain, MVVM is not mobile, okay? Not only mobile, it could be applied for any kind, and each one has its own frameworks or libraries to be used that will facilitate the communication. MVVM, just to reference, was created by two architects at Microsoft. So it's something really used on .NET, C# for websites, and works very well. So just to simplify, that was very, I would say, I try to put as many examples as possible. I try to do not be too much technical, but it's hard to do not be. But I'm open for any question, any suggestion, anything that I say wrong.
I think people right now are like, it's end of the day and the things are a little bit slow. We just got a message in the chat from Andre, and he was apologizing that he got COVID and he wanted to be here, but he just couldn't make it.
Oh,
He's
that's
taking
bad.
care of himself. Yeah. So he said hello.
Cool.
And yeah, I was actually curious because when I was researching, I saw a lot of content regarding, Windows, Microsoft, and so on, Android. And then for me, I was actually wondering, like, how can we apply it to iOS? But from a mention, that's fine.
Yeah, you can apply. There is ways to adapt. I mean, you don't need to be pure about MVVM. You can make your adjustments, but the way that they are moving on with SwiftUI, Combine, Compose UI, coroutines, it will facilitate a lot to use this architecture. And the good thing, it also facilitates a lot of testing, automated testing, which really good, and companies are really. I mean, I have been listening people say talking about tests, automated tests since 2009, uh, and but truly only in the past, I don't know, 5 years I really start doing that. And the tools are getting even better, even easier. The architecture we are talking more on how to do code injection to facilitate mock things, uh, all the concepts that you can apply and the stubs that you can have on the test. So it's definitely super powerful, and it facilitates a lot when you think about testing.
And if somebody's actually trying to move on to this, this methodology, where can they get started?
There are some very good Apple. I mean, if you start studying Swift UI, definitely is a good beginning if you want to program for iOS. If you want to, Apple has a very good tutorial explaining how to do it. They are not explaining the architecture. They are going to explain Swift UI and combine, but you're doing that, you're going to be doing MVVM. There are some also very good, I think it's Ray, I forgot the last name now, and he has some very good, not I would not say course, but examples of what's the MVVM and how to implement that on iOS, or MVVM, how to implement that on Android. Uh, but the main concepts are the things that I try to put here, and the advantage that you may have when using that.
And there's one thing I always like to ask people is there any pitfalls or any mistakes that we could avoid? Like any traumas that you can help people avoid?
For using, yeah, that's common. I mean, when something show up, everybody excited and start using, and then with time you start to see the problems. I start using in past year MVVM. Before I was using some different architecture, and one thing that I see some people complaining is for simple UI, it can create too much boilerplate code. I mean, unnecessary. It can be a complex UI if you're doing something simple, or if things get too complex sometimes. But anyways, I think in the end, everything depends on how do you implement that, and how that in the result of your implementation, because um, you can commit mistakes. And I think the most important are to uh, keep concise and try to follow the rules about the architecture to have everything well defined, and isolate, like clean architecture, every single class responsible for only one thing, and do not break the. I mean, if something, okay, I'm trying to do something, and I'm not being able to think in a solution. Research, don't break your architecture because something you cannot do something. Try to find a solution using the architecture. I think it's the best way to avoid mistakes.
Everyone else really, really quiet. Anyone else? Okay, then I think we can call it a day. Bruno, thank you very much for this.
Sure,
We
no
were
problem.
getting some comments when we were asking people, and a lot of people want the recording. I think it's a little bit about the
Yeah,
time there.
if when you see you have questions, my email is there. Just mail me, and I'll be happy to assist if I can. But thank you, everybody, and see ya.
Yeah. Bye bye. Thank you.